Hello there, Mr. Carlson here for section 1.5 of college algebra. In 1.4 we learned about how to solve quadratics with the quadratic formula and factoring, and now we're actually going to apply it to some word problems, to some applications. The first one says, find two consecutive integers whose product is 992. Well, two consecutive integers are two numbers where one is after the other. And so to write that down, the first integer I would just call x. Easy enough. And so then what would be the next number after that? Well, it's simply x plus 1. For example, if x was 10, then that means that x plus 1 would be 11. And you notice I've multiplied them together. A product is the answer to a multiplication question. So two consecutive numbers multiplied together, like 10 and 11, they tell us equal 992. And so we just need to find out what that x is to solve the problem. So let's do it. We'll do the distributive property, giving us x squared plus x is equal to 992. And whenever you're solving an equation like this, you want to move everything to one side and get a 0. So subtract 992 on both sides. If you fail to do that, you're going to get your signs wrong. So we get x squared plus x minus 992 is equal to 0. So now we would want to solve this. So x squared plus x minus 992 equals 0. There should be two answers to this. And if you can, you should try to factor it, but that's a little too much for me, so I'll just use the quadratic formula. So remember that from 1.4. So negative a is 1, b is 1, c is negative 992. So negative 1 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 1, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 992. So there's the top of our fraction, and the bottom is just 2 times a, which is 1, and that is equal to x. So let's clean this up a little bit. Let's do negative 4 times negative 992. I get 3968, and that will be plus because I have two negatives. So this will be 1 plus 3968 inside the square root, and we'd have 2 on the bottom. So let's, oh, and don't forget the negative 1 plus or minus that. So let's simplify that a bit. That'll be x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 3969 divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. So let's do the square root of 3969. And we get exactly 63. So this is x equals negative 1 plus or minus 63 divided by 2. So let's find out what those answers are. If I did negative 1 plus 63, that would be 62 divided by 2 is 31. So x equals 31. If I did negative 1 minus 63, that would be negative 64 divided by 2, which is 32, but that would be negative 32, because we did negative 1 minus 63 divided by 2, which is negative. So let's think about this. If x is 31, that was the first number that we found. The next consecutive integer would then be 32. So let's see if that works. Let's do 31 times 32. And sure enough, we get 992. So that was our answer. There's two consecutive numbers, 31 and 32, that multiply to make 992. Okay then, but what about negative 32? That's also an answer. Well, let's add 1 to that, which would give us negative 31. Would that also work? And the answer is yes, because if we did 32 times 31, we get 992, just like before. And notice that two negatives multiplied make a positive. So we look back at the original problem, and they said find two consecutive integers. Well, an integer is either a positive or negative number, or 0, that doesn't have any fraction or decimal. And so in fact, there's two sets of answers that work here. The integers 31 and 32 are consecutive and multiply to make 992, and negative 32, negative 31 are consecutive and multiply to make 992. So notice that our two x values that we got gave us two groups of answers, two groups of consecutive numbers. Let's do the next one. It says the sum of two the sum of the squares of two consecutive integers is 113. So this one's a little similar. The sum of the squares of two consecutive integers. Well, sum means addition. So the first integer, again, let's call x, and we're squaring that. The sum of the squares of two consecutive integers. Once again, 1 after x would be x plus 1. And look how I've done the sum of two consecutive square numbers. That's equal to 113. So there's your starting equation. Notice that it's similar but different from the previous one. So let's simplify a bit. X plus 1 quantity squared. Remember, that means the same as x plus 1 times x plus 1. So we need to FOIL that. So this x squared is just x squared. FOILing this would be x squared plus 1x plus 1x plus 1 equals 113. So there's our new equation, x squared plus x plus 1 equals 113. Let's combine like terms. These two combine to make 2x squared. These two combine to make 2x. And then I have plus 1 equals 113 still. Let's move the 113 over. So we get 2x squared plus 2x minus 112 is equal to 0. Now, at this point, we could go straight into the quadratic formula if we wanted to. However, there's a better idea. Do you notice that there's a number that goes into all three of these coefficients? They're all even, so that means 2 will go into all of them. If you ever are doing one of these and you notice that a number will go into all three, it's a really good idea to divide by that number just to make your life easier. You might be able to factor it, or the numbers in the quadratic formula will be smaller. So 2 goes into all of these, so let's divide the entire equation by 2. And remember, we need to do that to each term. So what we're going to get is these 2's will cancel, these 2's will cancel. So I get x squared plus x minus 112 divided by 2 is 56 equals 0. So let's see if this works. So we can factor this. I need two numbers that multiply to make negative 56 and add up to 1. And those numbers would be 7 and 8. The 8 needs to be positive because when we add, we need a positive 1. So the 7 is negative. So factored, this would be x minus 7, x plus 8 equals 0. And now we can use the zero factor property to solve that. So x minus 7, that's going to be x equals 7. Just flip the signs, basically. And x equals negative 8. So let's think about this. Will the same thing work that we had before? So if x is 7, then the next consecutive integer would be 8. Right? And that comes from just the two consecutive integers. So 7 squared is 49, and 8 squared is 56. So let's do 49 plus 56. Ooh, something happened. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 64. 7 squared is 49, plus 8 squared would be 64. And we get 113. So 7 and 8 are two numbers that would work because they're consecutive and their squares add up to 113. Now let's try this negative 8. 1 after that would be negative 7. And the square of that would be positive. The square of that would be positive. And so they'd add up to positive 113. So again, we have two sets of answers for that one. X equals, one answer group of answers is 7 and 8. The other group of answers is negative 8 and negative 7. So that's how you would do these two problems. Anytime they're telling you to find something that involves consecutive numbers, just remember, call your first one x, and the next one would be x plus 1, the next one would be x plus 2, the next one would be x plus 3. Sometimes I'll ask you about finding even or odd consecutive numbers. In that case, you would call the first one x, but then you need to skip a number. If they're all even, you need to skip the odd one and get to an even number. So then that one would be x plus 2, and then x plus 4, and then so on. And that would give you consecutive odd or consecutive even numbers. The next problem is a little challenging, so we're going to go ahead and stop here, and I will see you in part 2.